Hello, I'm Kevin Kosar, and this is my review of the book, The First Congress: How James Madison, George Washington, and a Group of Extraordinary Men Invented the Government. The book was written by Fergus M. Bordewich and published by Simon & Schuster in 2016. The men who drafted the U.S. Constitution rightly earn our eternal praise. A little over 237 years ago, they met in Philadelphia, where they pondered, debated, and haggled for 4 months. James Madison, George Washington, and the rest of the founders scrapped the Articles of Confederation and replaced it with a new governing document. The Constitution of the United States they enacted is a remarkable document, but parchment was not enough to meld together disparate peoples and states. A government had to be stood up to make good on the Constitution's promises to, quote, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, end quote. This great challenge fell to the first U.S. Congress, which convened between March 4th, 1789 and March 4th, 1791, and whose achievements were incredible. It's a story told with color and verve by Fergus Bordewich, the author of other much-lauded tomes on early America. Bordewich writes, quote, in its 3 sessions, this new Congress would create the departments of State, War, and Treasury, the Supreme Court, the federal court system, and the first federal criminal code, end quote. He further adds, quote, Congress would debate and pass the Bill of Rights. It would enact a bold agenda of duties and tariffs to create a revenue stream for the federal government and adopt a far-reaching financial plan that rooted the nation's economic system in capitalist principles. The first Bank of the United States would be launched, the first census begun, and the patent and copyright systems established, end quote. None of this was easy. Just getting Congress convened was difficult in a time when there was no proper capital. The young legislators, most were in their 30s and 40s, had to trek to New York City, which could take weeks. They came by carriage, sleigh, horse, and foot, and found lodging in taverns and private homes. The first day they assembled in Federal Hall near Manhattan's southern tip, with the House meeting on the first floor and the Senate upstairs. To their embarrassment, there were too few of them to constitute a quorum. The votes for president and vice president couldn't be counted, and nothing could be done. Virginia's Theodoric Bland was among the late arrivers, having been, quote, shipwrecked and land-wrecked, mired, fatigued with walking, and etc., etc. Neither chamber mustered a quorum until early April. Now, the concise language of the Constitution may seem straightforward, but actuating it proved difficult. What was the Speaker of the House supposed to do? Should the Vice President actively participate in Senate debates? Senators were chosen by their respective state legislators, but did this imply they were to consult with their home states' assemblies before voting? Did the charter's, quote, necessary and proper, quote, clause permit establishing a bank to regulate the value of currency, as Alexander Hamilton contended? The National Congress squabbled often heatedly over these subjects and many others, including proposed taxes on cod and molasses, and sundry other subjects. The permanent location of the nation's capital was a long and especially inflammatory dispute. Nearly every state's legislator made a play to secure the seat of government in their home state. Each imagined that having the capital would bring economic development and strengthen their state's influence over federal policy. This feud was settled ultimately through wheeling and dealing, deceit, and transactional politics of a grubby sort. Initially, they cut a deal to make Philadelphia the capital temporarily, which is where the first Congress held its second session. But it would be situated permanently in Maryland on the Potomac River, somewhere between Williamsport, a little south of Pennsylvania, and Georgetown. George Washington and his Virginia friends subsequently hard-bargained Congress to amend the statute. The new federal district would be further south and would encompass land in Virginia, 200 acres of which just happened to be owned by George Washington. Northerners were outraged, but voted for it because the South threatened to vote against Hamilton's bank bill. So, ultimately, they log-rolled and cut a deal. The reader of the first Congress cannot help but come away with a realistic perspective of Madison, Washington, and the founders. They were, as the book title notes, quote, extraordinary, end quote, in the strict sense. Most were more educated and successful than the average American, but they were not gods on Olympus. They were driven by parochialism, self-interest, and petty personal animosities often caused them to fall into feuds amongst one another. They all had basic philosophical differences over the authority of the federal government and the nature of the Union. What made them extra extraordinary is how they got beyond these fundamental differences and got things done. Delaware's John Vining said, quote, I have launched my bark upon the federal ocean, and should she arrive at her destined port with her invaluable cargo safe and unhurt, I shall not regret. She may have lost some of her rigging, which may be considered a cheap purchase for the safety of the whole. This is how he viewed the shared endeavor of translating the Constitution into actual governance, an imperfect adventure. These extraordinary men who convened, they took hard votes and they cut deals because that's what governing demands. Had they not, America would not be the world's longest living and most stable republic and preeminent country. Thank you for listening, and I hope you will follow my channel and listen to some of my other videos and book reviews. Have a good day.